Good morning, everyone. This is Almost Punk Enough, a That's Good Enough for Me.com podcast. This is Jeff, the founder and head editor of That's Good Enough for Me.com. And today we're going to be talking about some news and a bunch of Riot Fest stuff. And for the Riot Fest stuff, I brought in our we have two of them, Riot Fest aficionados. We have Jim and Jason here on the pod today. Hey guys, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks.
Excellent, excellent. We're quite excited here at That's Good Enough for Me.com because we started doing some Riot Fest coverage with Jim a few years ago, and it's all been great, and everyone seems to enjoy it. And then last year we actually had to double team on it. We've also brought Jason in because the fest is just such a big thing. And it was really great. And the coverage, once again, was really, really fun. And I enjoyed editing it and then reading it myself. So I hope we have some good stuff for that today. We're going to start out though. Today is our fourth podcast and my third overall. So I hope everyone's been enjoying them. One thing I've noticed, and I'm sure everyone who starts a podcast notices this, is their own little vocal tics. So I like a lot of people, I and ah a lot, and I realized I say like every 5 words. So we're trying to train myself out of that. I don't know if you guys have done many podcasts or noticed anything that we should be correcting in our podcast.
Yeah, I've done a few. It's hard to avoid those things, though. It's got to always have that in the mind, though.
Exactly. It actually becomes a bit of a mental struggle. Like I feel my there I did it like, but I keep telling myself like don't use these words, don't but I think we're getting the hang of it and it'll be pretty good. We're gonna start today before we get to the Riot Fest with some news, and the first one is a big one. And Jason kind of wrote about this on our site. It's the Methadones put out their first new music in like 700,000 years.
Yeah.
It's a new 7 inch. Jason, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the methadones, for those, especially here in Chicago, we've been fortunate because methadones have kind of been playing off and on the past couple years, and I'm pretty sure my band's played with them at least once, maybe twice. Hard to remember all the shows, but um, so yeah, they've been kind of getting active again as it seems like Dan Vapid and the Cheats are kind of become a little less active, and kind of seems like Dan Vapid's been putting his focus back more on Sludgeworth, who I know we've written about many times recently, and then now the Methadones are back. They have a new 7 inch coming out on Red Scare, which see there I didn't too, which is going to have two new tracks. I know they last week I wrote about they released a lyric video for the song "Love on Layaway," which is awesome. I really like Dan's vocal delivery on this. There's something about it that just sounds very personal. I think all of his, presentation is very personal and introspective, but there's something about this track that just really resonates. So, really looking forward to. I don't know honestly what the full plans are for the Methadones, if they're planning a full length or not. But for now, they're releasing a two-song 7 inch. I know they're going to start selling it. I think they're playing. I know the Stardom Fest in Rotterdam. I think next weekend, I think it is. And
Mhm.
then they announced a record release show here in Chicago at the Cobra Lounge on August 30th. Red Scare is taking pre-orders now for that 7 inch, so I would definitely say, hey, if you've ever been a Methadones fan, definitely check it out.
Definitely, yeah. I was kind of surprised that one came out, and it was a pleasant surprise. I'm really happy about that. And so everyone knows, Jason's band is Space Age Zeros. You should keep them in mind too. We do a lot of coverage on them, not just because he's one of us, but because we like them as a band. So yeah, that's a
Thank you.
pretty yeah no no worries. That's pretty excellent news. And yeah, so yeah, Stardom Fest is coming up next or this coming weekend, and then that show on the 30th. I would think they probably have something more in the works because it seems unusual for a band to like put together new music and just be like, yeah, we're just going to do 2 songs and that'll be it. I wouldn't be surprised if there's something more that they've got going on there. So that's pretty cool. And just this past weekend, We've just actually yesterday we released the new drive-by reviews. These are contributed by any members of the TGEFM staff and contributors, and they're just basically very quick, short reviews of either albums or EPs or things that have come out. This week's or month's reviews are mostly just Bad Dad and Dan Rice, but we've got new information on Arm's Length, Blaster slash Maverick, Catbite's Doom Garden, The End Times, Propaganda's At Peace, which a lot of people are surprised that we put a little little blurb review and nothing else. But I mean, you've probably already heard it. A lot of other great music that I think people should be checking out. And we do these reviews when we don't have the time for a full review. Another thing I wanted to bring up was the new EP by California Cheeseburger, Ball Aches and Headaches. Did either of you get a chance to check that one out yet?
I did. Yes.
Eh,
I yeah, I thought it was fantastic actually. It kind of okay, I was going to I don't know how you guys feel about this. When I first listened to it, it kind of reminded me of the first time I heard the Chats.
yes.
Yeah, kind of it has that kind of UK 82 angst, like a lot of the stuff that I grew up on when I was kind of getting into like crossovers, bands like Broken Bones, Discharge, GBH. It kind of had that kind of oi feel. Not that those bands are necessarily oi, but those are some of the first British bands I heard. But it kind of had more of a melodic edge to it. And I really like the brevity of the songs because they kind of are over before they get monotonous, which I think is a good framework for a song, especially for that style, I feel.
Yeah,
So I dug it.
it definitely doesn't need to be drawn out. One thing, so I was kind of turned on by California Cheeseburger. I think either earlier this year or late last year, and I did comment. I don't know what a California cheeseburger is.
I love the
Uh,
name. I definitely want to check them out,
yeah,
especially after Jason's synopsis there.
yeah,
Sounds like a lot of solid bands that are compared to them.
yeah. It's no, it's really fun stuff. So I've been a bit high, a bit bullish on them. Um, and yeah, so this new EP, it's pretty good. It's four songs. It's and Jason said there's only one song that's over 2 minutes, and that's just 2 minutes and 18 seconds. Everything else is sub 2 minutes. Nice quick jolt to the system. Really good stuff that I think people will enjoy. On the same note, we have a similar note. The Chugs just put out their Minnesota Sober single, which apparently is the first pre-release single on their upcoming, they call them six packs because they put out EPs of only six songs. And the reason for that is they're a band dedicated solely to Ham's beer. And, everyone of a certain vintage remembers the old animated Bear and his woodland buddies for Ham's beer. I can sing the whole jingle to myself. They just put out this song. It's really fun. It is that kind of straightforward, kind of goofy punk, but what I like about it is they obviously haven't. They don't feel that this is a well that's going to dry up because they've already got two EPs and a bunch of singles. So singing about Ham's beer, you figure would get kind of dry after a while. And we do have an upcoming interview with them in our Camp Punksylvania series because they will be performing there as well. We don't have a date on that interview, but that's coming up as well. I don't know if anyone got to listen to Minnesota Sober as well. I did. Uh, it's
Yeah, I did give it, Jeff, a quick listen. At first, it kind of reminded me of kind of that kind of definite, like, yeah, definitely the Minnesota sound. Hear a lot of, D4 off with their heads, but with a little more modern approach. It was a short, quick blast. And that concept is really unique of doing those kind of six pack series. I could kind of tell you, being in a band, that's something that we're kind of struggling with too, is kind of, we released a full length LP and you kind of release a large chunk of songs at one time, but when everybody's releasing something every 3 days, literally, it's hard to kind of keep in the mix. So that's a really brilliant marketing technique in this day and age, to just kind of move away from that album format and just continuously have something new. It's definitely a good approach.
Yeah. They in some ways, I don't even know if they're an active band anymore, but they remind me a lot of the Wonder Beers over in the UK. They I kind of got turned on to them in the mid tens, sorry, and yeah, so it's like the same kind of concept of just let's see how many songs we can make on very limited subjects. And do it successfully, and I think it's a lot of fun. So that new EP called Eternal Brutopia comes out July 18th of this year, and with that in mind, we're going to take a quick break and be back just in a second to start talking about things Riot Fest. And we are back. Once again, I'm here with Jason and Jim, our Riot Fest guys, and we're here to talk about all things Riot Fest this year. This year, they're celebrating an anniversary. There's a lot of great bands that are going to be performing. We want to start out first, both Jason and Jim, if you can respectively give us a little bit of history of your experience with Riot Fest, because I know you guys are like knee deep in this for decades, over a decade now. So why don't we start with you, Jason, and then we'll hop over to Jim.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks. It's interesting when Riot Fest first started, a lot of like friends bands were playing it, like the Methadone, Shot Baker, etc. And didn't really think much, it's just kind of at the time they were just kind of like, oh, it's just another big show, just, didn't really make it. And then when it kind of started expanding like to like the Congress Theater, and then they would have other shows throughout at smaller venues throughout town. I think it was 2009. I know we were talking a little bit about it offline. Was the first year that I actually went. So I think that was actually their like fifth anniversary show. It was a big weekend. I remember I went the night because they had Alkaline Trio, Screeching Weasel, and Pegboy all playing, along with a couple other locals. So it was like, oh, that's cool. I hadn't at that point. It'd been quite a while since I, seen Screeching Weasel because they went many years where they weren't active. So the combination of them playing with the others kind of got me out. So at that point, it was kind of interesting because it was kind of like, wow, I was seeing almost like a local show at a much big venue. Congress Theater is pretty big if you've never been there. Literally, it's an old movie theater converted. So that was really cool. That was kind of my first exposure. No real reason. The next couple of years, I just didn't go. Then, a few years later, it turned into the whole carnival atmosphere, which, kind of was met with a variety of responses from, the punk faithful, right? Because it kind of went from this club thing to this big outdoors thing that, almost kind of had a Lollapalooza feel.
Yeah.
And, I was a lot younger and, more critical, I guess, at that time. So it's kind of like, oh, wasn't for me. But they really did a lot of cool after shows. So in some of those early years of the big festival, I personally attended some of like the late shows because they put together some real cool stuff. Like, went to a couple at the Double Door, like Naked Ray Gun and Mudhoney. That was definitely a very memorable one. And then I remember the year after, they had Government Issue, who was like one of the first bands I ever fell in love with. DC melodic hardcore band. For those not familiar, they got them to play an after show one year. So I was kind of always still kind of connected to going to Riot Fest, but didn't really check out the Big Bang event. Then fast forward to 2016 when they finally got the original Misfits to reunite. So myself and like a lot of people I know that kind of never really went to check out the big event, that really kind of got them to finally go. And once I went to that event and kind of saw the big kind of carnival like atmosphere for myself, was like, oh wow, this is awesome. They do a really good job. The sound is amazing. The way they space out the bands and the stages is really well done. The vendor area, the food area, I mean, everything about it was cool. And that really changed my mind and opinion on the fest because, I just kind of figured it was something just not for me, just
Mm-hmm.
being, the type of event it was. And then, yeah, I mean, I've been going pretty much almost every year since. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 years I didn't go at least one day. Then of course there was COVID there the one year as well. But yeah, that's I won't go into too much till we get into more detail, but that's kind of my history with the fest.
Awesome. And Jim, I know you've been going quite a while too.
Yes. Oddly enough, my first year was 2009 as well. I was a big and still am Alkaline Trio fan, and I had been catching them pretty much every time they played in Chicago since 2000.
Nice.
And so when I saw that they were playing the show, I started to look into it and noticed that NoFX was on there, Butthole Surfers, Dead Milkmen, who, I've seen many times
Yep.
over the years. And I managed to rope my friend into going for the entire fest in 2009. And as Jason mentioned, it wasn't, the event that it is today in one location. It was scattered out throughout Chicago, with the Congress Theater being the primary location. And so, we would start out at the Congress and catch the headliners there, and then pop over to the Cobra Lounge or Metro and, see some of the other acts. And it was really awesome, just popping around the city late at night, seeing shows. It's kind of what it's all about. And that year, it started on a Wednesday with the Butthole Surfers at Metro.
Mm.
And this was the original lineup, and they were putting on their original show with the videos. And I don't know if you're not familiar with the original Butthole Surfers show, it was these crazy videos in the background. I mean, they would pop from being like surgical videos from the 1930s and 40s to
Yeah.
police videos. I mean, and then, cutting to like movies. And there's one section where it's just heads exploding over and over. It's an assault on the senses, to say the least. And when the show was over, and this is just Wednesday, we both had felt like we've been traumatized. And I'm looking around the audience as the lights come up, and I see, a middle-aged guy with his, like, I don't know, 7 to 10-year-old kid. And I'm thinking, what's that kid gonna grow up to be? Hopefully the next Lemmy or something like that. But
Right.
to go through that, it was pretty wild. And then the week just goes on from there with NoFX playing Teenage Bottle Rocket, Cockspar, The Arrivals. Jason mentioned Screeching Weasel. I was also drawn to the fact that they were uh, getting back together for this show because they played kind of sporadically over the years.
Right.
And yeah, that was amazing. 2009. And then ever since 2009, in some fashion or form, I went every year. Um, it wasn't the whole festival every year. Maybe it was just one day. I did catch the Descendants. I don't remember if that was like 2010 or 2011, but hadn't seen them. Definitely wanted to cross that off my list. And then, I think it was the first um, large scale uh, iteration was 2013 in Humboldt Park.
Mhm.
And that was the year they had Fall Out Boy, Blink 182, The Replacements, Pixies, Violent Femmes, Motorhead. Ridiculous, ridiculously stacked lineup. Caught all 3 days that year. Um, that was awesome. And then the next year, Humboldt again, 2014 was their 10-year anniversary, and
Mhm.
they had The Cure, The National, Primus, Weezer, Descendants, Dashboard Confessional, The Hold Steady, Rise Against, Jane's Addiction. I mean, just when you thought they couldn't top 2013, they went way over the top.
Right.
So those years definitely stick out. And I've been every year, and now it's become kind of a family affair. My wife, my kids, we all try to attend. We have friends that come into town, stay with us, and we all cruise down from Naperville to now Douglas Park and attend the entire fest.
Yeah. And you're right. Like it seems like almost every year they kind of up themselves. Surprisingly, I don't know how they do it most times. Like how can you get any bigger and yet they do it. And as Jason had mentioned, the year 2016 when the Misfits formed or reformed, and that also has become a kind of thing that people expect at Riot Fest, like some band that broke up years and years and years ago gets back together. And I know Operation Ivy is still on everyone's top list of whether or not that's ever going to happen. Um,
Well,
yeah,
that's
so
last year, Laura Jean Grace doing the this Operation Ivy set with Catbite. That
yeah,
was awesome.
yeah, that's yeah, definitely. Everyone's like, "Oh, is this the precursor to the return of Operation Ivy?" Um, and so I know that I personally like I had moved out of the Midwest. I think a year or two before Riot Fest actually started, and then in 2009 we moved abroad. So I was gone for 10 years, didn't get a chance to do any of that. So it's funny because I know so many people in the Chicago area because I grew up there. And it's fun to watch all the people I know kind of experience this from its earliest iterations to now this giant festival and the people who still support it. Now, Jim, you've made it a thing every year, if possible, to put together your prognostications on who's going to play and who might be reforming. And it's funny because you put a lot of research into a band's schedule to see whether or not they would even be contractually able to come perform. So let's
Right.
talk. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your predictions this year. Which ones you landed on, and which ones were airballs, if you will.
Well, I have to mention that last year, I did the same thing, obviously, for That's Good Enough for Me, and it was a major miss.
Mm,
So there was only one way to go this year, and I have to say, well, this year, obviously, yeah, I am kind of tracking. you know, does the band even have the availability to be in Chicago on those days? And are they playing, anytime? They say it's 90 days. If they're playing Chicago within 90 days,
Yeah.
then they won't be playing.
Hey, Jim. Sorry to interrupt, but that's what I was going to ask. Is it true? I always heard it's like 90 days in 90 miles. Also, is that have you heard that same thing? I've heard that was like the rule, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, yeah, that does ring a bell, definitely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I put together a spreadsheet and list out the bands that haven't played in a while. There are some bands that play every year, like Guar. For a long time, it was Taking Back Sunday. Um, and then there are other bands, that maybe every other year, every third year. So you kind of look at who hasn't played in a while. Do they have the availability? Um, so then getting to this year, there were certain bands that there was buzz about them playing. Blink 182 was one of them. Weird Al, definitely. There was buzz about that going practically all the way back to just a couple days after the fest last year.
yeah, I remember that.
Um, and then when I saw that the Sex Pistols were playing with Frank Carter, uh, that definitely just jumped out as, checking those Riot Fest boxes, a band that's reformed, that's been apart for a while, not the whole band, obviously, missing Johnny Rotten, but close enough. And that definitely jumped out at me as this is a slam dunk for Riot Fest. So yeah, and then Weezer hadn't played in a couple years, so that wasn't too much of a stretch. And Alkaline Trio was touring with Blink 182. Chicago bands played Riot Fest a lot.
Hmm.
So yeah, I was definitely happy to hit on those because those were the headliners, and had some misses down below, especially on the metal. This year for whatever reason is light on metal, and I thought there'd be some crossover from Louder Than Life Fest in Louisville, because they're in proximity. They happen to be the same weekend this year. So that's, obviously tough for bands to make that trip, but a few of them are, and I expected more. So, missing some bands like Drain, Sleep Token, although Sleep Token does have a Chicago date, I thought maybe they might be an exception to the rule, especially since they crushed it. I think it was 2023. Um, yeah, that was a standout set for me.
Nice, nice, very good. Yeah, it's. It's always fun to read through these prognostications, and you're very humble in when you get it wrong, and not many people are doing what you do. So I think you have a little bit of leeway in using your logic to try to get it together. One thing so a lot of these bands I've seen live at some point or another. Weird Al Yankovic, it's always fun. What I'm really excited for, even though I'm not there, I wish it could be. Texas is the Reason has been one of my favorite bands for decades now. Since Do You Know Who You Are came out, I was introduced in '96, and that's one of my favorite albums. So I think anyone who gets the benefit of seeing that played live is going to be having a good time with all that. And so now looking forward to the event coming up, let's talk about what bands you're most excited to see. We'll start. Either of you can jump in and tell us what you think. So let's start with Friday. If we know which bands are coming out on Friday, which ones you're most excited to see?
Hey, all right. Well, you know what I'm going to have to do because I I have them all in my head, the bands I want to see. But if we're going to go by who's on what day,
Oh, we don't have to. We don't have
okay, all right. Well,
to.
yeah, okay, yeah. Let's. I'm gonna exclude that because I just don't have the day by day memorized yet. But I will say this for me. For those who may or may not know, I'm like a huge like Fat Records guy, huge No Effects guy. So last year to me was kind of like Godly with the No Effects stage, which was pretty much like a dream show for anybody who likes that, right? Between the 3 days of the No Effects stage, right?
Right.
So it's no surprise to me that this year is kind of light on that stuff, especially after like last year. I don't even know if there are any Fat Records bands playing this year. I'd have to like look at the list again. But for me, this year, the thing that I really, really like is how this being, well, they're calling, I mean, technically, I was calculating this, they call it 20 years, but technically it's the 21st Riot Fest, right? Um, but the thing that I really like about this year is kind of how it's the return to a lot of focus on Chicago and Midwest bands,
Hmm.
um, especially for me. So like the having, of course, like Alkaline Trio, but then also having Screeching Weasel, Pegboy, Effigy, Smoking Popes, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that's great because that's something that I've always. One criticism I've always had is, they have like their small stage there, and I'm always kind of like, why can't they just have that, like, or even somewhere just have a true Chicago stage every year?
Yeah.
It's where this thing started. There's so many great local bands that have, keep coming up year after year. Then you have local bands that can kind of keep, not that they need help promoting the fest, but anyways, that's the thing that I really like. That's the big thing. I mean, there's so many amazing bands playing this year, but like that to me is huge, is having those bands. So, having those bands get the exposure, and then also like other like Midwest bands or bands from that era, like the huge one for me is Zero Boys. I don't know if you
Hmm.
guys are familiar with Zero Boys from Indianapolis. They have an amazing album called Vicious Circle, that was on Toxic Shock in the 80s. They're performing that album in full. That might be one of my most anticipated sets this year,
Yeah, I
simply
can't believe
because,
that so far down the line too. I mean, it's I one of my things that I have going is read the fine print, and the Zero Boys are in the fine print, and they
right.
probably shouldn't be.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I get that because in the core to the core Riot Fest audience, we've all gone enough now to know that the vast majority of the crowd are not really 80s underground punk rock kids anymore. So I get it. I mean, because the same could be said, like, okay, if that's the case, why aren't the Digits or the Effigies headlining, right? If we're gonna go that route, compared to like some of the bands that are playing higher than them, right? And there's a lot of amazing bands playing. So yeah, and then of course there's a lot of great UK bands playing this year. With or you're maybe I shouldn't say UK, but like 70s European bands, right? Because I mean we got like the Damned, Stiff Little Fingers, Buzzcocks are playing again 2 years in a row, which kind of
Yeah.
seems to be an exception this year. They were great last year. So just a very little side note on that is this is something that, and I don't know if we're going to get to this, but I'll mention it now. With this year, one of my biggest fears, and I'm sure Jim, you probably have the same thing, is I think this year has the biggest chance of having conflicts Usually, every day, like, yeah, there's maybe one or two conflicts, but I can kind of get over it. It's very easy to pick like the band over another one. Like this year, the biggest fear is, there's a good chance Green Day is going to play the same time as Jawbreaker, you know?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, ooh, that's a tough one because Green Day is a band I probably would not ever go see at their own show anymore. I mean, I haven't seen Green Day in probably 30 years. Though I do like
Yeah.
them. I think Saviors was an amazing album. I truly do. Um, it was one of my favorites of last year. And especially since they're overdoing the Dookie and American Idiot in full, I'm kind of hoping that maybe they'll do more of like a regular set and, they'll play songs from that material. So as much as I love Jawbreaker, probably more than Green Day, I've seen Jawbreaker a heck of a lot more times lifetime than Green Day. So I'd probably have to side with Green Day.
Right.
Um, I mean, it was easy when they had Foo Fighters versus Sludgeworth because I went across the street to watch Foo Fighters, so that was easy for many reasons. Sorry for the Dave Grohl fans in the room. But anyway, so that was so my tidbit about last year was they had Buzzcocks going up against Dead Milkmen. That was tough.
Ooh, yeah.
I'd
Yeah,
only seen Dead
who did you
Milkmen.
go? Who did you check out?
Oh, I Buzzcocks.
So I checked out the Dead Milkmen, and I love the Milkmen. Don't get me wrong. Maybe it was a sound thing. Maybe it was a sound bleed thing. Maybe it was because it was in the afternoon. I mean, it was underwhelming. Let's just put it that way. So you made the right choice.
Yeah. So I had seen the Milkmen once. I mean, whatever. It's probably like 92, 93. I was in high school still. And, they were great. And never saw the Buzzcocks. So that was kind of like, I have to go with a band I've never seen. Because, didn't know if I'd get the chance again. And, I mean, even though obviously it's there's only one original in the band, but it's still, I'm kind of the age where there's a lot of bands that I kind of focus on making sure I want to see that, like, maybe people would be like, oh, they're for various reasons, they only have one original member, or it's an original member that's only a bass player or a drummer, and people are like, oh, those bands are passable. I'm kind of the opposite. I'm like, well, you know what? I better see them now because the day is going to come when they're not going to be touring and playing. I'm going to wish I at least seen them once. So yeah, so I went with the Buzzcocks because, as I said, just kind of wanted to make sure that I saw a band that I had never seen before, which is, that's a really great thing about Riot Fest is there's in general, right? There's so many bands that you may not go to see on their own show just because, maybe it's a band you're only a casual fan of, or as, we've talked about, there's so many great reunions that you finally get to see some bands. So I am actually very excited about the Pistol set. Public Image Limited and Pistols were, some of the first bands that I got into when I was getting into, underground, college rock, indie rock, punk, whatever you want to call it. So I am excited for that. I am actually a really big John Lydon fan. And a lot of people aren't for many reasons, and that's certainly fair. So yes, of course, I would like for him to be there. Kind of going back to kind of what I was saying before, I foolishly kind of slept on a couple of their, reunion shows in the 90s. Just kind of one of those things. I was a lot younger and, kind of was one of those foolish that said, oh, this is a money grab. No way am I supporting this band. They said they would never play again. How can John Lydon play a show for money?
Sure. Yeah. I caught that one because that's another one where once you hear, hey, they're getting back together, even if it's filthy lucre, even if it's a cash grab, you go. And so, yeah, I caught that at the Aragon.
Awesome.
It was good. I mean, it's what you'd expect. But I am excited to see them at Riot Fest with Frank Carter, see what that's all about.
Yeah, I've seen some of the videos and they definitely look promising. So other than that, the other thing that I do want to call out is, I will say, like, in the past couple of years, I've kind of gotten into a lot of more of the, what we'll call, a lot of people call it the more, modern pop punk stuff. To me, it's kind of more emo, but some people call it pop punk. A lot of the stuff like Knuckle Puck, Microwave, bands like that, who a lot of people categorize them as pop punk. I mean, I guess me being in more of a true, 90s Lookout Records pop punk guy, to me, that's, not enough Ramones influence to be pop punk, but, so that's a thing that I do like about Riot is because a lot of those are bands that, like, I like, but like I probably wouldn't maybe go see at their own show just because I'm not big enough of a fan. Um, last year, Neck Deep's album was one of my favorites of the year. I kind of wish they were playing this year. I was kind of hoping they were, but there's a lot of band of that ilk that are playing too. So that's great, and I too kind of have like a metal background. So it's been great over the years, getting to see Slayer, Testament, etc. Over the years too. Bands I love, but once again, seen them so many times, maybe wouldn't go see them at their own gig, but at Riot, it's great. And it's nice because it kind of breaks up the monotony of just seeing 10 bands in a row that are all the same. But yeah, so that being said, this year is definitely one of the more promising lineups, and looking forward to it.
With the in regards to that like kind of pop punk comment, like I tend to try to refer to it. I like to refer to it as like arena pop punk. Like it's very like this is the kind of stuff that a big band's going to be playing in an arena to a
Yeah,
bunch of
that's fair.
people like who like
Yeah.
don't really know what original pop punk is.
Yeah, and hey, I mean, I look at it this way. I mean, every era has their kind of like gateway bands. Like Jim mentioned Sleep Token. I am so bummed that I did not see him at Riot. It's kind of interesting because I remember when they were booked for that, a lot of my metal friends were like losing their minds, and I just kind of thought, oh, based on kind of their imagery, it was kind of like, looking at them like, that's I don't think that's a band for me, anyways. I think I listened to them once and was kind of like whatever, but then I'll admit I kind of bought into the hype of this year. I mean, it's insane the amount of promotion that they're doing. How they completely like the day tickets went on sale, sold out an entire arena tour, like good for them. And I actually love their new album. I mean, I don't even know how to categorize it. I don't think you can. I mean, I know like people are very polarized about that band, but yeah, but it's kind of cool though that one of their first big shows in the state. I don't know, was that even their first show in the States at Riot Fest? Maybe it was. I don't know, but it was definitely one of the first big ones for sure. So that's Riot Fest can definitely. I only bring that up because Riot Fest can definitely boast having a lot of bands. First big shows here in the States. So, yeah, really
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
Definitely. When you look back over, um, the band lists in previous years and look at the bottom, you'll see there are bands that slowly are rising up, right? They got broken over with Riot Fest, and now they're headliners in other fests, or maybe headliners now at Riot Fest. So they
Yeah,
definitely, you don't want to sleep on those bands at the bottom because they are going to be the future stars.
yeah. Like
Definitely. Yeah.
I remember looking at a lineup of a year that I didn't go and seeing like Imagine Dragons really low on the lineup. I forgot what year it was, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a year before that I ever went. It was like, oh, that's awesome. Because I mean, I'll admit, I do like some of the early Imagine Dragons stuff. I thought they were cool. I mean, they definitely, I think they changed way beyond to an extreme overproduced band now. But some of the early stuff was kind of cool. So, yeah. But that's another good example. So.
Sounds good, definitely. And so, Jim, you are also looking forward to a lot of bands this year. What are some of your top draws on the stage this
So
time?
I have mine broken out by day. Weird Al.
See, Jim is more organized, Jason. You should be better at this by now. I'm just kidding.
I should be. No, I know. I know.
Well,
I'm only a bass
I,
player.
I,
Give me some slack. If I was a guitarist, maybe I'd be more on top of it. I'm
I
just
put
kidding.
my outline all together. There's something to be said for having an outline or just kind of, freewheeling it. So it takes all kinds for sure.
you're both
Um,
winners in my book. I love you both.
Definitely. But yeah, Weird Al. I actually saw Weird Al at the Bloomington Center for the Performing Arts in Bloomington, Illinois, probably about 8 to 10 years ago. He puts on a show. Yeah, I can't wait to see it in front of a festival audience because he breaks out all the costumes, the fat costume, um, you know, uh, Amish Paradise. He's a true performer. So I definitely would say, as long as there are no conflicts, catch Weird Al. I'm going to catch him no matter who he's going up against. Uh, the Pogues, that's one for me where I get to check a box there, and Shane is gone and we miss him, R.I.P. Um, but the Pogues, they're an amazing band just musically, so
True. Yeah, definitely.
that's one not to miss. and who knows how much longer they're going to be doing it. Obviously, they don't come around very often. Knocked Loose for someone on the heavier side, that is circled, and I'm hoping that there are no conflicts there because I'm pretty amped about that. The old classics, the Hold Steady, they're a fun party band, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's that band, the Hold Steady. I mean, that's a band I've heard of for years. One of the guitarists in my band is actually a huge fan. I remember he went to see him at the Salt Shed. I think Dillinger Four played too, which is why that one you were there, Jim. I don't know. Um, but yeah, so that's how they kind of came on my radar a couple of years ago. I was like, oh, okay. And then actually, believe it or not, Milwaukee Summerfest, they played one day on one of the free stages, and we happened to be there, so I caught them, and they were fantastic. They were so entertaining. Um, yeah, but kind of forgot they were playing too.
I mean,
Great band.
Craig Finn is an amazing songwriter. Um, he's a modern day, if you want to say that, kind of a Bruce Springsteen. He paints that picture, he takes you to a time and place. Um, yeah, I love their songs, and they do put on a great show. And then, I've got this theme going this year called Read the Fine Print, because I mean, it's so stacked this year that the bands that are in the small print, I mean, there are huge bands in small print here.
I know, kind of
Friday,
surprising, huh? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of blowing my mind at times. But Census Fail will be fun on Friday. The Digits, Sam I Am. Shonen Knife. I don't know if many people know about Shonen Knife, but they've been around since the 90s. They opened for Nirvana back in the day.
Oh, yep.
And they're all-female Japanese band that has kind of a Ramones three-chord feel, and I think that'll be really fun.
Yeah,
And
I was fortunate enough to I did see them once at the Double Door many moons ago, and they were fantastic. I see once again. I love your approach of reading the fine print because yeah, you've already mentioned like five bands that I'm surprised like Sam I Am that I didn't even mention when talking about the ones I'm looking forward to. Glad you're more organized than me.
it's all good. It's all good. And Emo Phillips, I don't know what that's going to be about, but if you all remember the comedian Emo Phillips, I don't know. Obviously, emo music. Now we've got Emo Phillips. I mean, Emo Phillips was just hilarious back in the day,
Yeah,
and I'm surprised he's still around, and they're going to put him out there, and
yeah.
I don't
We've
want to
got
miss
both.
that.
We've got both kinds of emo, the music and the Phillips.
Yeah, yeah, we'll have it all covered. Saturday, we mentioned Sex Pistols, Beach Boys.
Yeah.
I I want to check that out. I know, I think Brian Wilson's involved. He better be, otherwise it's not really the Beach Boys. But you know, I think that'll be fun. And I've never seen the Beach Boys. You know, they. I think people probably saw that and said like, hmm, something here does not belong. But the Beach Boys kind of that California fun and sun sound eventually kind of made its way into that California punk sound. So I think it makes sense for them to be on there, and I want to check it out.
Yeah, definitely. Like a lot of bands, reference that the Beach Boys were a big influence in their songwriting and composition, especially like multi-vocal harmonics as well. I know Brackett, like, like they are just like enthralled with the Beach Boys, and their 2005, I think, album Requiem was just totally inspired by it. And so, yeah, I think it fits in a way, and it'll be interesting to see how the crowd likes it or doesn't. But I think people will really get into it.
I have a little prediction on the Beach Boys being included. You know, it's always kind of been a long running thing with Riot Fest that they've extended an invitation to John Stamos to appear at the fest, right? And he's turned it down. And like, was it last year or the year before? I can't remember. They kind of had like the John Stamos like butter statue. It was kind of funny to see. And anyhow, you know, he has performed off and on throughout the years with the Beach Boys. So when I saw they were announced, that was kind of my first thought is, ooh, this might be the way to get John Stamos to finally appear at Riot Fest.
Ooh, good prediction
Uncle
there. Hmm.
Jesse from Full House, for those who don't know.
Yeah, but so
Yeah.
so here's a question though. Will politics come into play? Because he got a little bit of grief for like basically showing up at the White House and being supportive of Trump. Like, will it?
Oh, did he? Okay, yeah,
Yeah, like
I
everyone's like,
must have
no,
missed that.
not Uncle
Okay,
Jesse, kind of
yeah.
thing.
Well,
So,
yeah.
We'll see. Yeah. That's an interesting piece of information. I'll be curious to see if he shows up. Um, and then on Saturday, James, I don't know if you know how many of you are into James. I mean, I think it makes sense for them to be at Riot Fest. I just saw James open up for Johnny Marr at the Riv, and they're great. Um, so I'm not going to miss that. And it's something that's kind of strange as far as the whole Riot Fest marketing this year because they do their albums, the album plays. Like Jason mentioned, Zero Boys are doing an album play. We're getting like some amazing album plays this year. We could do a podcast on the album plays alone. And oddly, James is touring right now, and they'll be touring when they hit Riot Fest, playing Laid in its entirety. And that, for whatever reason, that's not mentioned as an album play. I'd be very surprised if they switch things up and don't play it in its entirety at Riot Fest. I'm fingers crossed that they're going to because, yeah, that's my favorite album by them. So I won't miss that. And then Saturday for the fine print, Bouncing Souls. Not going to miss that. So, newer band, Military Gun. I don't know if you guys follow them at all, but I've been getting into them and, you know, want to check out some new blood and see what it's about. Super Chunk, an old fave.
oh,
Um,
definitely yes.
yeah, and then a band that, once again, how can they be in the fine print? The Damned.
Yeah,
They
They're always amazing live. I mean, I've seen many formations of that band over the years, in even recent years too.
Yeah, they were great a couple years back. And I'm looking forward to that, catching them again. Dave Vanian, Captain Sensible, they're true legends.
definitely. I think the Damned being like both legendary and classic, as was mentioned before. Like, but they're not super big in like the general popular mindset. Like people who know the Damned, but there's a lot of people who don't know. So maybe this will be an interesting kind of introduction to a band that's been around for like decades and decades.
Yeah, hopefully, that's what Riot Fest's all about.
Yep.
And then Sunday, Green Day, obviously the big name. Kind of surprised that they landed Green Day. I mean, not not too much of a stretch for them to be playing Riot Fest. It's just surprised they haven't played it more over the years. Uh, the Wonder Years, I'm a fan. I've never seen them, so
Oh,
can't miss
really?
that one.
Okay.
Bad Religion, just an old Riot Fest favorite. Seen them many years at Riot Fest. Seen them outside of Riot Fest. You can't miss Bad Religion when they're playing. And then Jason mentioned the Chicago band Screeching Weasel, Peg Boy. They're in the fine print for Sunday, so
Smoking
don't miss
Popes.
them.
Yep.
And then Weekend Friends, um, another up and comer, and want to see what they're about.
Yeah, they're really good. We try to cover them any chance we get on the site, anytime they put out something new. They, I'm really high on them as well. Yeah. That's the what's interesting is when we get to the fine print stuff, I had mentioned earlier, like Texas is the reason. They're not in the fine print, but for a band that put out what, one 7 inch, one full length and not much else back in the mid '90s, it's surprising that they're higher up on that scale than some of these other bands who have been more productive and tend to have a bit more popularity. Not that I'm knocking it because, like I said, I love Texas is the reason. But they've, reformed and played shows every once in a while over the past decade or so. So it's not like this is a new and exciting thing to have them out, playing a show. So I'm kind of curious what that rationale is. I mean, I
Jeff, is that are they consider is that considered a reunion performance? I'm not that
I
familiar with them other than by name, but have they been playing a lot, or is this like their first show back in a while?
they I time flies goofy for me, but I think they've been playing shows like off and on regularly. I wouldn't consider this like
Okay.
a shocking reunion.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That
I was
they
thinking
did
maybe that's the
a
reason why. Yeah.
yeah, they did a big Revelation Records, I think, because they were on Revelation Records. I think they did a
Yeah.
fest a
Yep.
while back, and
Okay.
that was like their first show back in a while. But I think they've been doing things since. Either way,
Hmm.
it's just that surprises me. But then again, like they're great bands, so I can see where they put them there. Just maybe not over like some really big up and comers on that same day. Like the Linda Lindas are super popular, and they continue to be.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so but regardless, there's still a lot of great bands playing that day. And like I said, Football Heads also out of Chicago. Uh, you
Hmm.
know, you got a lot of great bands playing that day, all the days really. So I think
Yeah, it's
it'll
going to be
be
a
a good
tough
one.
one. Like Jason mentioned with conflicts, I'm really
Yeah.
nervous to see the schedule come out because I know it'll be stacked with conflicts.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing that
Yeah.
Riot Fest does, I mean, they do, and I read this, and it makes sense. Another festival was talking about conflicts and people complaining, and they have to set up conflicts. They don't want everyone to be at one stage, moving from one stage to the next. They need to spread people out, and conflicts are going to happen, especially with a lineup like we have this year that's pretty packed with solid bands. Um, but Riot Fest, if they set up a conflict that's really questionable, just for example, like a Green Day versus a Bad Religion, um, they'll then Bad Religion will play an after show one of the nights. They'll set it up so that if there's a band that you really want to see, as long as you've got, the stamina to make it to an after show, you can see them. So that's one thing I appreciate.
That sounds really good. Now, if I recall correctly, was it last year that there were some issues with the positioning of the stages and some sound bleed from like the big main stage? Was that last year?
I think it's every year, but
Oh,
Um.
okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I extremely remember because, as I said, last year was big for me with the No Effects stage, right? I remember during both like Circle Jerks and there was another the next day, whoever played before No Effects, I can't remember who it was. Same thing. Like I remember, like the Offspring were playing, but you could hear their set like at full volume. Where like the bands would even like wait till they were between a song to like start their next song because like yeah
Oh,
the
wow.
sound bleed was that bad and I don't ever remember because the positioning though of that stage was the same um as it usually is. At least it felt that way where it was. But for some reason, I don't know if they had the volume louder or maybe the speaker
Right.
positioning. But it's funny that you mentioned that. I never really heard anybody else talk about that like after the fact. But when you said that, that was my first thought because I remember like Keith Morris stopping their set and saying, "Okay, we'll wait for them to finish" or whatever. I don't remember if it was like Fall Out Boy or Offspring or it's somebody like that that was playing at the same time. And yeah, there was definitely like, oh, there'd be a lull on the No Effects stage as like a band would wait for like that band on the other stage to finish.
Wow.
yeah, no, that was definitely an issue last year on the No Effects stage. I remember Brendan from the Lawrence Arms made some kind of comment about the band that was playing, at the same time on the stage behind them. Um, yeah, it was a thing. Dead Milkmen dealt with it, I think, face to face. So yeah, it was a thing last year.
So I'm curious if that's something that the organizers would acknowledge and try to repair or plan differently. And like Jason said, maybe it was just speaker positioning because I think we've all been to festivals where like it really depends on where everything is pointing, whether or not you hear the other bands going on, and whether or not it's significant enough to kind of drown out what whomever you're trying to watch at that time. So yeah, well, this has been pretty fun, and I think we've kind of covered most of what we wanted to talk about right now. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of things we can still talk about. So I'd like to invite you both back sometime in the future for some more drilling down, maybe when we get closer to a time when we know who's playing when, or beforehand. So I'd like to thank you both for coming in today and taking this moment in the middle of your Monday to chat with me. And yeah, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, I mean, yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, this was a lot of fun, and yeah, I agree. I think that would be a very interesting concept because we both Jim and I seem to share the same fear of conflict. So I think once those schedules come out, that would be a very interesting conversation. Like, hey, who are you going with and why?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having me as well. I'm looking forward to that schedule. We can definitely get back on and and chop it up and see where we are. But as we've said, there are going to be conflicts. The question is what and when. And yeah, it'll be fun to talk about, you know, who's the go-to for each person.
Yeah, that'll be good stuff. Well, once again, thank you very much, guys, and we will see you next time. All right, have a great one.
You too.